Here we are, and welcome to our ongoing study in 1 Kings and Chronicles. It's interesting that when I first started into this study through the Old Testament, the idea was to do an overview, a survey, okay? And that was 7, 8 years ago, somewhere in there. And so it's become much more of a verse by verse than, sometimes I skim over things, but generally speaking, it gets pretty detailed. And this evening is going to be a little different than I had planned. I changed my direction just this morning, and you'll understand as we start in here. So let's pray first. Father, this evening we thank you that we can gather together to look into your word, and we know there's much that you can give to us to apply to our lives as we walk with you, and we just pray that you would direct in our time together, that you would open our hearts to what you have for us, and that you would guide in our discussion as well. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. 1 Kings chapter 2. We're going to pick it up at verse 10. We're starting with the kingship of Solomon. Okay, verse 10 of 1 Kings chapter 2. It says, "Then David slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. The days that David reigned over Israel were 40 years. 7 years he reigned in Hebron, and 33 years he reigned in Jerusalem. And Solomon sat on the throne of David his father, and his kingdom was firmly established." And this is where we have to step back. I want to give us some historical context here because of what David charges Solomon with in the beginning of chapter 2. So backing up to the beginning of chapter 2 of 1 Kings, it says, "As David's time to die drew near, he charged Solomon his son, saying, I am going the way of all the earth. Be strong, therefore, and show yourself a man. Keep the charge of the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, to keep his statutes, his commandments, his ordinances, and his testimonies, according to what is written in the law of Moses, that you may succeed in all that you do and wherever you turn." I thought it was interesting here as I was reading through this again this morning that he says, "Be strong, therefore, and show yourself a man." And it's interesting that Solomon is going to carry out the instructions that David's about to give in these verses. And it's believed that Solomon was about 20 years old when he came to the throne. So I can understand why David would say to his son, be strong, okay, be a man. Like, stand up, take responsibility. Solomon has grown up in the court. He's had a privileged life. And he's not, I'm not sure how well prepared he was to take on the kingship. There's no way to know that, except we know what's coming later where he asks the Lord for wisdom and understanding. Let's carry on here. So first, David says that he commends him to walk with the Lord, to obey whatever is in the law of Moses, so that he could succeed, so that the Lord may carry out his promise, which he spoke concerning me, saying, if your sons are careful of their way, to walk before me in truth with all their heart and with all their soul, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. So to have a king obviously from the line of David on the throne, it meant obedience to the Lord, son by son, generation by generation. Otherwise, it would stop. However, there is the promise that eventually there would be a permanent descendant of David who would be on the throne, which we know to be the Messiah. Okay, now, this is where it gets interesting. Now you also know that Joab, the son of Zeruiah, did to me what he did to the two commanders of the armies of Israel, to Abner, the son of Ner, and to Amasa, the son of Jether, whom he killed. He also shed the blood of war in peace, and he put the blood of war on his belt, about the waist, and on his sandals on his feet. So act according to your wisdom, and do not let his gray hair go down to Sheol in peace, but show kindness to the sons of Barzillai the Gileadite, and let him be among those who eat at your table, for they assisted me when I fled from Absalom your brother. Behold, there is with you Shimei, the son of Gera the Benjamite of Bahurim. Now it was he who cursed me with a violent curse on the day I went to Mahanaim. But when he came down to me at the Jordan, I swore to him by the Lord, saying, I will not put you to death with the sword. Now therefore do not let him go unpunished, for you are a wise man, and you will know what you ought to do to him, and you will bring his gray hair down to Sheol with blood. Very interesting verses, very interesting commands that David gives to Solomon to carry out. And as I thought about this, I thought, we need to go back and look and establish the historical context here, because if you just read these verses by yourself, you'd wonder what in the world is going on, and why is David all of a sudden becoming, it almost seems like he's bloodthirsty for some reason, but what was the reason? And was he justified in his reasoning? Okay, so first of all, we're going to jump way back. I want us to go back to 2 Samuel chapter 2. We're going to be reading a lot of verses here, but I think it will help us as we move forward with Solomon, especially in the first years of his kingship. And so in 2 Samuel chapter 2, picking it up at verse 8. Okay. I'm going to back it up here a little bit, because the first few verses of chapter 2 talk about when Saul has died. Okay. So David, is in Hebron. That's where he is at this time. He's been there. He actually went there right after Saul died in battle. He went to Hebron, and the elders of Judah came to him and were prepared to make him king. However, there's this situation that comes up where you have, let me see if I can get, where I want to pick it up. Let's pick it up at verse 4, where I said, And they told David, saying, It was the men of Jabesh Gilead who buried Saul. David sent messengers to the men of Jabesh Gilead and said to them, May you be blessed of the Lord, because you have shown this kindness to Saul your Lord, and have buried him. Now may the Lord show loving kindness and truth to you, and I will also show this goodness to you, because you have done this thing. Now therefore let your hands be strong and be valiant, for Saul your Lord is dead, and also the house of Judah has anointed me king over them. But Abner, now that's an important name, Abner, the son of Ner, commander of Saul's army, had taken Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim. Now that's on the east side of the Jordan River. He made him king over Gilead, over the Asherites, over Jezreel, over Ephraim, and over Benjamin, even over all Israel. Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he became over Israel, and he was king for 2 years. The house of Judah, however, followed David. The time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. It's interesting that when David actually became king and was in Hebron, he decided the elders of Judah wanted him just to take the kingdom. And we know from the history of David that he was not about to take things into his own hands. He always deferred to the Lord making the move. And so he wasn't about to go and just cause civil war in the country in order to become king, because then there would always be this animosity toward him from the other tribes. And so he said that he would wait until the Lord made it clear that he could go up to Jerusalem. But we have Abner here, who was obviously convinced that Ishbosheth should be the next king based on lineage. Saul was the king. Usually culturally in those nations, the next son in line became the next king. He inherited it. And so in Abner's mind, this was the logical thing, that David was a usurper as far as he was concerned. And so he made him king over the northern tribes. And Joab, this is where we get Joab coming into the picture here. Joab the son of Zeruiah and the servants of David went out and met them by the pool of Gibeon, and they sat down, one on one side of the pool and the other on the other side of the pool. Then Abner said to Joab, "Now let the young men arise and hold a contest before us." And Joab said, "Let them arise." So they arose and went over by count 12 for Benjamin and Ishbosheth the son of Saul, and 12 of the servants of David. Each one of them seized his opponent by the head and thrust his sword in his opponent's side, so they fell down together. Therefore that place was called Helkath Hazerim, which is in Gibeon. That day the battle was very severe, and Abner and the men of Israel were beaten before the servants of David. Okay, so we have a defeat by Abner and his army. Thinking back, first of all, who is Joab?
With the army of
Who by relation? I'm talking about. He was a nephew of David, the son of Zeruiah, his sister, David's sister. Okay, what is our understand? What do we know about Joab before this event? That's almost like the first introduction we have to him. I believe it is, at least. Where does he come into the picture concerning David? Well, okay, it's actually after this, but we know about the other story of Joab was involved with David when he sinned with Bathsheba, and he was instructed by David to make sure that Uriah the Hittite was on the front lines so that he would die. And so Joab did that, and so he was very much involved in this conspiracy. Okay? And I think it's obvious to say that after that, he had great power over David. Pardon me? Blackmail, yes. Okay? Because only Joab knew that David had commanded that Uriah be killed. So he held some information that would have something you wouldn't want to have revealed. At least David, as the king, wouldn't want to be, found out that he was a murderer. Okay, so carrying on here, because of this situation, verse 18. Now the three sons of Zeruiah were there, Joab and Abishai and Asahel. And Asahel was as swift-footed as one of the gazelles which is in the field. Asahel pursued Abner and did not turn to the right or the left from following Abner. So Abner flees, and the brother of Joab, Asahel, pursues him. Then Abner looked behind him and said, "Is that you, Asahel?" And he answered, "It is I." So Abner said to him, "Turn to your right or to your left and take hold of one of the young men for yourself." Like, go kill somebody else. Okay. And take for yourself his spoil. But Asahel was not willing to turn aside from following him. Abner repeated again to Asahel, "Turn aside from following me. Why should I strike you to the ground? How then could I lift up my face to your brother Joab?" However, he refused to turn aside. Therefore, Abner struck him in the belly with the butt end of the spear. So he just pushed it back, okay? So that the spear came out at his back, and he fell there and died on the spot. And it came about that all who came to the place where Asahel had fallen and died stood still. But Joab and Abishai pursued Abner, and when the sun was going down, they came to the hill of Ammah, which is in front of Giah, by the way of the wilderness of Gibeon. The sons of Benjamin gathered together behind Abner and became one band. And they stood on the top of the certain hill. Then Abner called to Joab and said, "Shall the sword devour forever? Do you not know that it'll be bitter in the end? How long will you refrain from telling the people to turn back from following their brothers?" Joab said, "As God lives, if you had not spoken, surely then the people would have gone away in the morning, each from following his brother." So Joab blew the trumpet, and all the people halted and pursued Israel no longer, nor did they continue to fight anymore. Abner and his men then went through the Arabah all that night, so they crossed the Jordan, walked all morning, and came to Mahanaim. Then Joab returned from following Abner when he had gathered all the people together. 19 of David's servants, besides Asahel, were missing. But the servants of David had struck down many of Benjamin and Abner's men, so that 360 men died. And they took up Asahel and buried him in his father's tomb, which is in Bethlehem. Then when Joab and the men went all night until the day dawned at Hebron. Okay, jumping down to chapter 3, verse 6. It came about while there was war between the house of Saul and the house of David that Abner was making himself strong in the house of Saul. Now Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, the daughter of Ariah. And Ishbosheth said to Abner, "Why have you gone into my father's concubine?" Now see, this was a no-no, okay? When the king died, his concubines became the possession of the new king. And so for Abner to take one of Saul's concubines was, I guess you would say is tantamount to treason, okay? Standing and doing something against. So Ishbosheth would wonder about his loyalty, okay, in doing this, that he might himself want to become king. Then Abner was very angry over the words of Ishbosheth and said, "Am I a dog's head that belongs to Judah? Today I show kindness to the house of Saul your father, to his brothers and to his friends, and have not delivered you into the hands of David. And yet today you charge me with a guilt concerning this woman?" In other words, I've saved your life, and you're going to deny me this woman? Okay, how dare you? May God do so to Abner, and more also, if, as the Lord has sworn to David, I do not accomplish this for him, to transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and to establish the throne of David over Israel and over Judah, from Dan even to Beersheba. And he could no longer answer Abner a word because he was afraid of him. Abner put Ishbosheth in power, and now he's going to, he's threatening to turn over the kingdom to David. All right, I'm already getting hoarse. Then Abner sent messengers to David in his place, saying, Whose is the land? Make your covenant with me, and behold, my hand shall be with you to bring all Israel over to you. He said, Good, I will make a covenant with you, but I demand one thing of you, namely, you shall not see my face unless you first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when you come to see me. So here is the situation where Michal had been given to David after he killed Goliath as his wife, but then further down in the story, she was given to another man. Okay, when David was running from Saul, Saul sought to undermine David, so he gave his daughter away to someone else. So now David's determined to take her back. I'm not sure why he necessarily, if I can be so bold, she was the one who also chastised David when he publicly danced before the ark being brought into Jerusalem, and said that he had humiliated her and the family publicly. And so at that point, she was, why would David necessarily want her back with that attitude? I don't know. But at any rate, legally she was his. At any rate, dropping down to verse 17. Now Abner had consultation with the elders of Israel, saying, in times past you were seeking for David to be king over you. Now then, do it. For the Lord has spoken to David, saying, by the hand of my servant David, I will save my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and from the hand of all their enemies. So Abner was well aware that David was to be the next king. And yet he set up Ishbosheth. Then Abner and 20 men with him came to David at Hebron, and David made a feast for Abner and the men who were with him. Abner said to David, let me arise and go and gather all Israel to my lord the king, that they may make a covenant with you, and that they may be king over all your soul desires. So David sent Abner away, and he went in peace. The next part is where it gets really interesting. And behold, the servants of David and Joab came from a raid and brought much spoil with them, but Abner was not with David in Hebron, for he had sent him away, and he had gone in peace. And when we covered this a long time ago, it was kind of like David was well aware of this conflict between Abner and Joab. And I think David discreetly sent him away on a raid somewhere else when Abner came for this peace conference, so that there wouldn't be this butting of heads. Okay, so Joab returns, and he finds out, I'm not going to read the rest of the verses here just so we can move along. He finds out that Abner has been there to set up a peace and to restore Israel as one unit, one nation. Okay, and so he decides that, he doesn't like this, that David let Abner go. He feels that Abner should have been possibly arrested, even put to death, because he was treasonous. He had committed treason by setting up another king. And so, starting in verse 26, when Joab came out from David, he sent messengers after Abner, and they brought him back from the well of Sirah, but David did not know it. Aha. Here's our conniving Joab. Okay? He pretty much does what he wants to do. That's kind of the way he operates. He's the commander of the army of Judah, and he knows it. And he's always exercising his power. So Joab took Abner aside into the middle of the gate to speak with him privately, and there he struck him in the belly, so he died on account of the blood of Asahel, his brother. Afterward, when David heard it, he said, I and my kingdom are innocent before the Lord forever for the blood of Abner, the son of Ner. May it fall on the head of Joab. Now here's where, when we think of 1 Kings chapter 1, where David is telling Solomon now to deal with Joab, here's where it starts. May it fall on the head of Joab and on all his father's house, and may there fail from the house of Joab one who has a discharge, or who is a leper, who takes hold of a distaff, or who falls by the sword, or who lacks bread. So Joab and Abishai, his brother, killed Abner because he had put their brother Asahel to death in the battle at Gibeon. I think Joab had more reasons than that, but that's the one that's here. Because Abner had killed Joab's brother, he's getting his revenge. But I think he's also felt that he was justified in doing this because of Abner, because Abner had set up Ishbosheth, as king. All right. I'm just looking at my notes here to see if there's anything else I wanted to say on that. Any comments that you'd like to make? I think it's pretty clear, isn't it? Okay. The next person that was mentioned by David, okay, when he was talking about Joab having killed Abner, he also mentions Amasa, okay? And this is found in 2 Samuel 17. Okay, and this has to do with a particular guy named Sheba, okay, who goes about a revolt. And we pick it up at, Amasa in chapter 17, verse 25. Okay. All right. Absalom set Amasa over the army in place of Joab. So Amasa had this relationship with Absalom. Now, when Absalom goes about his revolt, Amasa takes over of the army, because I think Absalom didn't trust Joab because of his allegiance with David. Now Amasa was the son of a man whose name was Ithra, the Israelite, who went in to Abigail, the daughter of Nahash, sister of Zeruiah, Joab's mother. And Israel and Absalom camped in the land of Gilead. Okay, so let's see. Another reference for that is 1 Chronicles 2, verses 16 and 17, because Abigail was the sister of David. Okay, so Amasa is also a nephew of David and a cousin of Joab's. So we know that, okay, in this situation here with Joab, Joab had disobeyed David by killing Absalom. Okay, he was supposed to bring him back alive. And that involved him being demoted by David from being commander of chief, and Amasa replaced him. Okay, so we have 2 Samuel 20. This has to do with Sheba. It says, now a worthless fellow happened to be there, whose name was Sheba, the son of Bichri, a Benjamite, and he blew the trumpet and said, we have no portion in David, nor do we have inheritance in the son of Jesse. Every man to his tents, O Israel. So all the men of Israel withdrew from David and followed Sheba, the son of Bichri. But the men of Judah remained steadfast to their king from the Jordan even to Jerusalem. And we have here Sheba's revolt, what actually takes place here. And he manages to flee, okay? Without reading all the verses, I'm dropping down to verse 8. When they were at the large stone which is at Gibeon, Amasa came to meet them. Now Joab was dressed in his military attire, and over it was a belt with a sword in its sheath fastened at his waist. And he went forward, it fell out. Joab said to Amasa, is it well with you, my brother? And Joab took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him. But Amasa was not on guard against the sword which was in Joab's hand, so he struck him in the belly with it, and poured out his inward parts on the ground, and did not strike him again, and he died. And then Joab and Abishai, his brother, pursued Sheba, the son of Bichri. Okay, so again, we have someone who's in command. Joab, I believe, was not pleased, maybe that's an understatement, that Amasa had replaced him as commander-in-chief. And so I'm sure in his mind he was looking for the appropriate opportunity to deal with him, and he got it. And so he murders Amasa, who was not deserving, okay, of this, because Joab is just hungry for power. and he was not in power, and so he took things into his own hands and put himself back in power. And it's interesting that when he just steps back into the role as commander-in-chief for David's army, that David never confronts him about that. Why?
Because as we were talking before, he kept his secret
He's keeping his secret. Yes.
about David's past.
Yes. So Joab always had this control over David, and David, I believe, was very intimidated by Joab.
Kept silent.
Pardon me?
Kept silent.
Kept silent, yes. And so David felt, okay, when we think about those verses back there in 1 Kings where David says to Solomon, okay, you need to take care of Joab, okay, and a couple others that we're going to talk about here, because Joab would have nothing over Solomon. Okay, Solomon could deal with Joab without any consequences. All right, there was good reason also in David's mind, but we'll get to that in a moment here. Anyways, I wanted to kind of set that stage so that we could better understand why David says what he does and what his objective was in having Solomon deal with these guys. And then you have also Shimei, okay, or Shimei, however you say his name, where he cursed David. Okay, as he was fleeing from Solomon, or Absalom rather, he was throwing stones and cursing him and all, and David said at that time, I'm not going to put you to death. I guess we could add the word yet. Okay, because what he was doing was actually treasonous. Okay, to slander the king and throw stones at him and basically try to incite a revolt against David should have been punishable by death. But David, in his mercy, decides not to. All right, so let's go back to 1 Kings, finally, chapter 2. All right, and, okay, picking up verse 13. This is interesting as well, and you'll see, because of what we already have said, why things transpire the way they do. Now, Adonijah, the son of Haggith, came to Bathsheba. So who's Adonijah? Is it Solomon's brother? Yes. Okay. So he comes to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon, and she said, do you come peacefully? And he said, peacefully. Then he said, I have something to say to you. And she said, speak. So he said, you know that the kingdom was mine. Okay, what had Adonijah tried to do before this? He had tried to take the throne. Solomon had two coronations, basically. He had an impromptu one. It happened very fast when Adonijah went out beyond Jerusalem and invited all the sons of David and certain officials, okay, and he basically had himself anointed king. And when David had it found out, he immediately sent Solomon out and had him crowned a king, okay? And then, of course, Adonijah, all of Adonijah's friends fled, okay, as soon as Solomon was anointed king. They're really faithful people. You know, they were just looking for what they could get, not what it was going to cost them. And so he flees, but he's spared, okay? He's not killed. He acts just like, let's see, did I have the verses for that? Let me think here. 1 Kings 1, verses 5 and 6. Let's just back up for a second. Okay. Now Adonijah, the son of Haggith, exalted himself, saying, I will be king. So he prepared for himself chariots and horsemen with 50 men to run before him. His father had never crossed him at any time by asking, "Why have you done so?" Preceding him, announcing his coming, okay? And he was very handsome, and you would think that Adonijah, knowing the demise of Absalom, that he might have thought, I should probably be more discreet instead of parading before everybody. Of course, we know then his whole plot fell apart. The thing is, as you go on here, in verse 7, it says, he had conferred with Joab, the son of Zeruiah, and with Abiathar the priest, and following Adonijah, they helped him. But Zadok the priest, Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, Nathan the prophet, Shimei, it's interesting that Shimei shows up there, Ray, and the mighty men who belonged to David were not with Adonijah. So here we have Joab showing himself again. Does Joab know that David is to be the king of Israel? Yes. He knows the prophecies. He knows what's supposed to happen. So what possessed him to align himself with Adonijah?
Maybe he wanted to take on, to show disapproval for David's plan and what's going to happen.
Okay.
He just want to confuse the action.
Yes.
The action.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Maybe he wanted also to be, if Adonijah would become the king, he would be elected as a
Commander.
important VIP person.
Yeah. As we said before, Joab was always in it for the power. Okay, the control. After he killed Amasa, okay, though he became commander-in-chief, he never had the same respect, I don't believe, from David or perhaps even others in the court who recognized or understood what he had done, but didn't have the, let's put it this way, didn't have the guts to say anything. Keep your mouth shut and you'll keep your life. Because Joab will take care of you if you don't open your mouth, okay? You may just find yourself dead. At any rate, so he aligns himself, and I think he's thinking, I'm not even sure how much of a believer he really was, okay? To know the truth, to know that God had said that David was to be king, and then to align himself with Adonijah, he somehow thought that he could get around what God had promised. It almost seems that way. Well, otherwise, if he was convinced that that could not happen, would he have done this? And it's interesting that who else goes with him? Abiathar the priest, and then those who do not go with him, faithful people. And we're going to get into that in just a minute. But now we have, so Adonijah is under house arrest. Okay? He's not put to death, though he was deserving of death for his treason. David, again, does not do anything about it. I think because he just feels he cannot do it because of his own past sin. Okay? There's no way to say that definitively, but it almost seems like he's intimidated by people who try to usurp his authority, afraid that they'll reveal something about him that would go public and destroy himself and perhaps divide the nation. So, yes, he lives with a guilty conscience. Okay. And even though the Lord obviously had forgiven him and cleansed him, it's always something. God may say he takes our sins and buries them in the deepest sea, and as far as the east is from the west, but for us, they're still there. And the only thing we have to go on is God's mercy and his grace, that he's not going to do anything with that information, now that he's forgiven. Okay, so going back here again, pick up where, so Adonijah has come to Bathsheba. It says in verse 16, "Now I am making one request of you. Do not refuse me." And she said to him, "Speak." Then he said, "Please speak to Solomon the king, for he will not refuse you, that he may give me Abishag." Remember Abishag? Abishag was the virgin who cared for David in his last days. All right? "That he may give me Abishag the Shunammite as a wife." Bathsheba said, "Very well, I will speak to the king for you." I'm not sure if Bathsheba didn't realize what the implications of this would be. Maybe not. I don't know. At any rate, she's going to do this for him. So Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak to him for Adonijah, and the king arose to meet her, bowed before her, and sat on his throne. Then he had a throne set for the king's mother, and she sat on his right. Then she said, "I am making one small request of you. Do not refuse me." And the king said to her, "Ask my mother, for I will not refuse you." You should never do that. You should never promise to do something before you know what the request is. But
Half of the kingdom.
yeah, there we go. Here we are. So she said, "Let Abishag the Shunammite be given to Adonijah your brother as a wife." King Solomon answered and said to his mother, "And why are you asking Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? Ask for him also the kingdom." Well, if you're going to just ask for Abishag, why not ask for half the kingdom? Maybe we could share the throne. Okay? Half for Adonijah, half for me, Okay. "Ask for him also the kingdom, for he is my older brother, even for him, for Abiathar the priest, and for Joab the son of Zeruiah." Oh my goodness, guess who he mentions here? He's remembering what Adonijah has done, and he mentions here, and while you're at it, he can set up his throne, and he can have Abiathar as his priest, who defected to him, as well as Joab, my commander-in-chief, who defected to Adonijah. Okay? All right. But it's interesting here, he says, "For he is my older brother." And see, in tradition, Adonijah would have become the next king, right? And that could be what motivated him in the first place, is that it's rightfully mine. Why should David be king, all right, when I'm the next in line? I'm the oldest son, okay? Whether he did that or not, but it seems reasonable to think that. Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, saying, "May God do so to me, and more also, if Adonijah has not spoken this word against his own life." What has Adonijah requested that's so wrong?
His father's, I don't know,
Caregiver, but
was
she
his
was,
concubine or his
no, she
caregiver?
wasn't concubine. It says exactly that she was caring for him, but he didn't know her.
Okay, but she still belonged to David, okay? When...
Property.
Is exactly right. I mean, that's just the way, not that it's right, but that's the way women were treated, and even into our own day, okay? So when David died, she became a part of the harem, okay? She was just there because she had been with the king. Even though they didn't have any sexual relationships or anything, it was a matter of ownership. Okay, and so Abishag belonged to King David, and by default now belongs to Solomon. Okay, and so by Adonijah asking for her to be his wife, It was tantamount to wanting to be king. And that's why Solomon says what he does. Well, if we're going to give him Abishag, why not give him half the kingdom? Okay? And so he's going to pay the price. Because he's been under house arrest. And if he had just stayed there and and behaved himself, he could have had a nice, long, cushy life. All right? But he hasn't changed. Nothing's changed. He still and he knows that in this request, it gives him that power. And that's what he was after. Okay. So Solomon goes on. Now therefore, as the Lord lives, who has established me and set me on the throne of David my father, and who has made me a house as he has promised, surely Adonijah shall be put to death today. So King Solomon sent Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, and he fell upon him so that he died.
No fooling around, your own brother.
The killing was like the drinking the coffee.
Yes, that's about right.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Was Adonijah deserving of death? Vern says yes. What do the rest of you think? What do the rest of you think?
Just think he was under, we'll call it house arrest or whatever.
Yep,
And in that time period, there was no remorse. What he was doing was he was plotting his next move.
exactly.
And he followed Absalom because Absalom, he set up the tent on the roof.
Mm-hmm.
And with all the concubines, when David fled,
Yes.
and he went into them right away.
Yep.
To establish his
To establish his kingship. Yes.
Yeah, if you have a hint that somebody's gonna kill you, you probably wanna get them first, right?
Well, that's true too. Okay.
Really, the asking for Abishag was the same as going to the roof.
Yes, exactly.
Even though it didn't happen, but it was the attempt.
Yeah, see, and this would be public knowledge, okay? That Solomon had given him Abishag, and publicly that would say he's in a position of power, that he shares the throne with Solomon. At least that's the way I understand it. And that's why I think Solomon says what he does is, this is not a co-regency. We're not sharing this.
And the Lord gave it to me and me alone.
You got it. And he was right to say that.
Yeah.
And so Adonijah is now a treason. He's against Solomon. And even if Solomon had not given Abishag to him and said, no, you can't have her, and let him live, would that have been a good idea?
No, another plot would have seeped in.
Yeah, he'd never let it go. He'd always be looking for an opportunity to take the throne. And he could be like these other people who have stood against Solomon or David and plot something to overthrow the throne. Okay? And so, in a sense, this is cleansing. Okay?
But from his position, I think he was right to see, I'm older, I deserve the throne, even though he knows that the Lord gave to Solomon.
Yes.
It's not right to say that. If the Lord's word comes over anything else,
Absolutely.
Exactly.
not man's customs.
Well, that's the thing. Man's thinking in his own mind. I mean, is it any different today? People carry on their lives, right? Thinking that I can do what I please and God's not going to do anything about it.
They have rights.
Pardon me?
They have rights.
Yeah, we have rights. Yeah. To choose my own destiny, right? Pardon me? And he did. Yes. And Solomon is carrying out exactly what God never comments. So it would seem that, Solomon did what was right in the Lord's eyes. It doesn't matter who you are. That's kind of the problem we've got in our society, is those who have positions of power seem to be above the law. And they can get away with all kinds of atrocities without having to pay the price, because they can pay off the judges and they can, above the law. And so this shows us that no one is above the law. Doesn't matter that you are the brother of the king, you will pay the price under law.
Too bad we don't have that same system.
Today.
In some respects,
Not that many more than.
yeah. At any rate, okay, so I had written in my notes here under verses 13 to 25, this was Adonijah's play on the kingdom, another conspiracy. And he was trying to claim the throne, and Solomon interprets and recognizes exactly what he's about. And so he has to die. Okay, let's go on to verses 26 and 27. Then to Abiathar, the priest. So now after dealing with Adonijah, here are the other two conspirators, if you want to put it that way. Said to Abiathar the priest, "Go to Anathoth to your own field, for you deserve to die." Because when he went with Adonijah, it was also treason. "But I will not put you to death at this time, because you carried the ark of the Lord God, before my father David, and because you were afflicted in everything with which my father was afflicted." Okay, so why does Solomon not execute? Why is Abiathar not executed?
Because of the ark of the Lord which he carried. But I'm thinking here it says, "I will not at this time."
Yeah.
At this time, so it is conditioned here.
Oh, yeah, there's a condition. Yeah, so he's putting him into exile. Go home, stay there. And basically it's because he had been faithful to David, okay? And he was in the priesthood, okay? And he had been faithful to David, and he had helped David to get the ark to Jerusalem. And so he says, based on your past performance, I'm not going to execute you, though you deserve it. So go home. See, he would know that Adonijah is already dead. Okay, and now he's been called into Solomon, probably thinking he's dead too. I'm about to be executed, okay? And was deserving because he had sided with Adonijah. But because of his faithfulness to David and the Lord previous to this, Solomon gives mercy, executes mercy on him, okay? And it said, because he had stayed with David, even when David was in exile running from Saul, Abiathar was the priest that stayed with him, okay, and counseled him and encouraged him, and so he gets to live. However, the warning is there, as you said, Eva. It's kind of like, but if you try any shenanigans again,
Game over.
you're dead, okay? So did you get the message? I think he did, okay? All right. In deposing Abiathar, Solomon fulfilled the prophecy given to Eli that his family would not continue in the priesthood. Let's go back and look at that for a second. 1 Samuel chapter 2. Okay, starting at verse 27. Okay, let's see, where am I? Verse Samuel 2:20, if I can find the verse, that'd be good. Okay. Then a man of God came to Eli and said to him, "Thus says the Lord, did I not indeed reveal myself to the house of your father when they were in Egypt in bondage to Pharaoh's house? Did I not choose them from all the tribes of Israel to be my priests, to go up to my altar, to burn incense, to carry an ephod before me? And did I not give to the house of your father all the fire offerings of the sons of Israel? Why do you kick at my sacrifice and at my offering, which I have commanded in my dwelling, and honor your sons above me by making yourselves fat with the choicest of every offering of my people Israel?" You remember Eli's sons? Okay, who,
They were not fulfilling their duties.
no,
They were tampering with the offering.
yeah, they were taking the best meats for themselves. Okay, there's only one offering that the priests were allowed to eat, and that was the peace offering. And so any of the offerings offered for sacrifice for sin or whatever, they had to be burned up completely. No one eats anything, okay? But they were abusing that, and they were also abusing the daughters of Israel who were coming. They were immoral with them.
Inappropriately.
They acted in it. That's a good way, that's a polite way to say it. Okay, all right. So, why is Eli the one who's being chastised here by the Lord?
Because he didn't correct his sons. He
Yes.
just let them do whatever they wanted.
Yeah, he should have removed them from being priests because of their immorality.
Bring
Okay.
them out and spoil the child.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. All right. Going on here. Therefore, the Lord God of Israel declares, I did indeed say that your house and the house of your father should walk before me forever. But now the Lord declares, far it be from me, for those who honor me I will honor, and those who despise me will be lightly esteemed. Behold, the days are coming when I will break your strength and the strength of your father's house, so that there will not be an old man in your house. You will see the distress of my dwelling, and in spite of all the good that I do for Israel, and an old man will not be in your house forever. Yet I will not cut off every man of yours from my altar, so that your eyes will fail from weeping, and your soul grieve, and all the increase of your house will die in the prime of life. This will be the sign to you which will come concerning your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas. On the same day both of them will die. But I will raise up for myself a faithful priest who will do according to what is in my heart and in my soul, and I will build him an enduring house, and he will walk before my anointed ways. Everyone who is left in your house will come and bow down to him for a piece of silver and a loaf of bread, and say, please assign me to one of the priest's offices so that I may eat a piece of bread. So here we have that Eli, his line would not continue in the priesthood, that it's over. Okay, and so with the removal of Adonijah, who was a descendant of Eli, this prophecy has come to be. Okay, there is no one left in Eli's line in the priesthood. Okay, going on to verse 28. Back to 1 Kings, sorry. 1 Kings 2, verse 28. Now the news came to Joab. What news is that? For Joab had followed Adonijah, although he had not followed Absalom. Okay, remember we did mention that this evening. Joab had stayed faithful to David during Absalom's revolt, but now he doesn't. Okay? And Joab fled to the tent of the Lord and took hold of the horns of the altar. It was told King Solomon that Joab had fled to the tent of the Lord, and behold, he is beside the altar. Then Solomon sent Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, saying, go fall upon him. Who's Benaiah? Why would David send Benaiah to the I wanted to say temple, but it's not that. It's to the tent. Okay. the tabernacle. Pardon me? Yeah, and he's a priest, okay? However, we talked in the past about the fact that he had stepped out of the priesthood so that he could become one of David's mighty men, okay? He was much more a warrior than he was a priest. That was his desire, was to serve David and to be in a position in the military. That was his desire. And so, but he's still a priest according to God, all right? He was one of David's mighty men. It talks about that in 2 Samuel 23, verse 20, and 1 Chronicles 27, verse 5. And he was a son of the priest Jehoiada, all right? Okay. And he's been faithful to David all along, okay? He came to David when he was in exile from Saul, running from Saul, and he's been with him ever since, all right? And has proved himself to be a faithful man. All right. So here we have, okay, I didn't finish that whole passage I was going to read, I don't think. Where did I leave off? Okay. Oh yeah, okay, at the end of verse 29, Solomon sends Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, saying, "Go fall upon him." So Benaiah came to the tent of the Lord and said to him, "Thus the king has said, come out." But he said, "No, for I will die here." In other words, I think somehow Joab thought if he stays in the tabernacle, he's safe. Okay? But he does say, "But I will die here." You know, he knows if he goes outside the tabernacle, he is in fact dead. Okay? All right. And Benaiah brought the king word again, saying, "Thus spoke Joab, and thus he answered me." The king said to him, "Do as he has spoken." He's told you how he's going to die, so let's just go do it. "And fall upon him and bury him, that you may remove from me and from my father's house the blood which Joab shed without cause." And that's why I went back and we dealt with those two passages of him killing Amasa, okay, for one. All right. "The Lord will return his blood on his own head, because he fell upon two men more righteous and better than he and killed them with the sword, while my father David did not know it." So he took things into his own hands when he should not have. "Abner the son of Ner, the commander of the army of Israel, and Amasa the son of Jether, commander of the army of Judah." And in both cases, as we already said before, he did this because he was power hungry and he wanted no one standing in his way. "So shall their blood return on the head of Joab and on the head of his descendants forever. But to David and his descendants and his house and his throne may there be peace from the Lord forever." Then Benaiah the son of Jehoiada went up and fell upon him and put him to death, and he was buried at his own house in the wilderness. Was that okay for Benaiah to go in and kill Joab at the altar?
I don't think so, it was okay, because I remember that if you come to the temple and you hold the edges, what do you say, the corners of the table,
Yeah,
you shouldn't be touched.
okay. That's why he went there, thinking he was going to be safe.
If you're a priest. But he wasn't a
Not
priest.
necessarily.
Benaiah was a priest,
No, Benaiah was, but not Joab.
not Joab. I mean, yeah. So the question here is, I appreciate the fact that Benaiah, when Benaiah said first, "Come on out."
Yeah,
And Joab said, no, I'm going to die right here. And Benaiah goes back to David and says, you know, here's a man, okay, Joab has always taken things into his own hands. Okay, he's always done what he wants to do in his way, and if anybody stands in his way, he's gone. Okay? Benaiah who's now in a position of authority from David, does not take things into his own hands. Solomon, sorry. So he goes back to Solomon and says, now what do I do? Solomon says, go in, kill him. Was Benaiah right? Was he in his right to go into the tabernacle?
I think they should have taken him out, even by force, and not do it in the
He
temple.
was following what the king told him to do.
Pardon me?
He was obeying what he was obeying the king.
He was obeying Solomon. Solomon said, go in and do it.
And Solomon had the authority from the Lord, I suppose.
Yes. It's a bit of a, I see Vern kind of smirking back here. What do you think?
It's kind of interesting, I'm fast forwarding, but when we had Athaliah, the
Mhm.
queen that actually murdered all the kids other
Yep.
than Joash.
Okay,
And they present Joash in the temple.
okay,
She's yelling out treason and all that. It says very specifically, don't kill her here. For the priest it said, let her not be slain in the house of the Lord.
okay,
Drag her out, and then they kill her.
right,
So
Yeah.
maybe this is years and years later.
yeah,
It's like, oh, we already did that, and that's not good.
yeah. The only thing I can say, God says nothing about it.
I'll say there's no condemnation here.
There's no condemnation. Was Joab deserving to die? Yes. He chose where he wanted to die. And Solomon even confirms that, he killed 2 innocent commanders in chief so he could take their power. Okay? So Benaiah was within his rights to go into the tabernacle because that's the only one who could go into the altar. Okay? But I guess he could have dragged him out, maybe, but Solomon said, no, kill him there, so he's obeying the king.
I know, terrible situation.
Yeah, terrible situation, exactly.
Go to the temple and kill somebody, I don't like it.
Yeah,
Even going into the temple, the priests had to be
clean,
properly, go through all that cleansing ceremony and everything in here.
yep,
Well, Joab was no better. I mean, here's this murderer that's gone into the temple thinking I got a free pass if I stay here.
okay, yeah. Now, so Joab's in the tabernacle, holding on to the horns of the altar. Is he repentant?
He's already defiled the altar
Yeah,
because he's a murderer.
but he knows, yeah, is he repentant of his past crimes?
No, I wouldn't say so.
No, he's just trying to save his own skin. That's all he's about, okay?
He'd just be in the courtyard too, right?
Pardon me?
Like he's not actually in the tabernacle, like just in the courtyard? Is that where the altar was?
Go ahead, Vern, I'm just not sure.
I'm just listening to you, John, because I remember you talking about
Oh.
the setup of the tabernacle.
Okay, yeah, no, I think he actually went into the altar. The fact that he grabbed hold of it, okay, yeah, he went as far as he could go. He's looking for mercy, but he's not okay, he was unrepentant. Was his death justified?
I would say so.
Yes, he was a murderer, okay? So according to the law, because he was a murderer and it was known that that it wasn't an accident, okay, he couldn't run to one of the cities of refuge because he'd be cast out because it's known, I mean, it was public knowledge that he had murdered Amasa and Abner. I mean, you can't, he did that in front of the army, okay? So everybody knows what he's done. So he couldn't run to a city of refuge because you can only go there if you were there you had committed homicide by accident. Okay, it wasn't deliberate, it wasn't planned. Okay, and so he wasn't entitled to a trial because it talks in the scripture about the avenger of blood. So when you were guilty of murder, then the family could chase you and put you to death. Interesting. Okay.
I really think that he was counting on the situation which he will not be killed because he is in tabernacle and in the temple, and they will not, nobody there to kill him
Yeah.
in the place.
Yeah. Why would he go there otherwise?
Exactly.
I mean, he could have fled out of the country. He could have gone to Esau or Ammon or whoever. He could have left the country and just been left in exile. Okay?
Thought he was safe. Thought he was safe.
Yes, he did. I think that's why he chose that. It was the closest place to go to. And so rather than having the, Benaiah chasing him and probably the military along with him, okay, he decides to go where he thinks he's safe, but he's not. Okay, verse 35, and then we're going to close it off for tonight. It says, the king appointed Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, over the army in his place. So now here we have Benaiah becomes the new commander-in-chief of the army, and the king appointed Zadok, the priest, in the place of Abiathar. Okay. I think that's a good place to stop. Now, we didn't make much progress, when you look at the notes pages, but I think if I hadn't gone back and dealt with these other events, we would have been kind of scratching our heads, unless you would automatically remember those things, but I wonder if we would.
I doubt that.
Pardon me?
I doubt that.
You doubt it. That's why I thought we need to go back and find out, why did David say these things to Solomon? And now Solomon is carrying those things out, but he's not finished. We're going to pick it up with some more of them next week. And there's good reason why David had these people dealt with, not just because of their actions, but he was looking much farther reaching than just dealing with these people. Okay? And we'll see that when we talk about it next week.
This
So,
is great that you go back to the chapters before. Otherwise, really is so many details, so many names,
Yes.
and positions.
yes.
You might have trouble to connect everything.
Yes, that's why I kind of felt I needed to go back and kind of give you the historical context, get all these people straight in our minds as we move forward. And like I said, there's more reason for David saying to Solomon, you need to deal with these people than just because of their past sins. It's much more far-reaching than that. And we'll see as we talk about it next week.
The
Okay.
only sad thing is that he started his reigning from killing, really.
Yes, yeah, and it's an interesting way to start your political career.
And you just have to make the kind of cleaning up the house.
Yeah, that's exactly what he was doing. He was cleaning up the court, and I mean further reaching than the court,
Clear
but
out the trash.
yeah. Woo. Taking out the trash, okay. All right, yes. But when you think about it culturally, what Solomon's doing here at the beginning of his reign is not unusual for other nations around Israel either. When a king would come into power, he'd know who the people were who were a threat to him, and he would have them removed. Okay.
It's also great that he has authority. I mean, Solomon has authority, and not only him, but kings giving the order, they also following their own orders,
Okay.
meaning that they should not make decision for themselves different than for others.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
we see, it's just opposite as you mentioned.
Yeah, I appreciate, like we were talking about here about Benaiah, I appreciate the fact that even though Solomon had told him, go and deal with Joab, okay, I don't know that he knew, well, no, he knew that he was in the tabernacle, okay, but he doesn't take things into his own hands, okay, because he realized Joab wasn't going to come out. And so he goes back to David, or not David, Solomon. I'm sorry, I'm going to do this a lot probably. I've been dealing with David for so many lessons that I got to get clued in here, okay? And so
He didn't want to kill him in this sanctuary.
yeah, he didn't want to. He realized that he was polluting the tabernacle by doing it there. But Solomon said, do it. And but I think Solomon now has the right person in a position of control of the army. Someone who's been faithful to him all the way back to his running from Saul, and the fact that he knows he's not a man who's going to just do his own thing, that he's always going to get his direction from the king, which I think is really wise. Okay. All right, thanks, folks.
Thank you.